I'd always thought my life with Claire was something solid, like the oak table in our dining room, scarred but dependable, weathered by years of shared meals and quiet evenings. We'd been married for 12 years, built a home in the sleepy outskirts of Portland, and raised 2 kids who were now old enough to roll their eyes at my dad jokes. Claire was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. Sharp green eyes, a laugh that could disarm anyone, and a way of moving that suggested she knew exactly where she was going. I'm not a jealous man by nature. I trusted her. Maybe that was my first mistake. It started with the late nights. She'd always been a night owl, but this was different. Her phone buzzing at odd hours, her slipping out of bed to take calls in the kitchen. She'd come back with excuses. Work stress, a friend in crisis, her sister's endless drama. I didn't push. I'm a mechanic. My hands are better with engines than emotions. But then I found the receipt. It was crumpled in the pocket of her coat, a coat she hadn't worn since last winter. A dinner for 2 at La Rose, a swanky place downtown we'd never been to together. The date was a Tuesday, a night she'd told me she was at a book club. I held that slip of paper for a long time, staring at the numbers, the elegant font, the $120 total. My stomach churned, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. The next week, I started paying attention. She'd leave the house in heels I'd never seen, her perfume lingering like a ghost. I'd sit in the garage, tinkering with a carburetor, listening to the kids argue upstairs, and wonder who she was meeting. I didn't want to believe it. Claire wasn't the type, or so I told myself. But doubt is a slow poison. It seeps in, stains everything. I started checking her phone when she showered, something I'd never done before. The messages were locked behind a passcode I didn't know. That's when I knew something was wrong. She'd never hidden anything from me. Not until now. One night, I followed her. She said she was grabbing groceries, but her car didn't head towards Safeway. It turned east, toward the city's edge, where the lights dim and the streets get rougher. I kept my truck a few cars back, my hands sweaty on the wheel. She pulled into a parking lot behind an old brick building, a bar I'd never heard of, the Rusty Anchor. I watched her step out, her hair catching the streetlight, and disappear inside. I sat there for an hour, engine off, heart pounding. When she came out, she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, his arm brushing hers. They didn't embrace, didn't kiss, but the way she tilted her head toward him told me everything. I drove home in silence, the receipt burning a hole in my mind. His name was Daniel. I found it out by accident, or maybe desperation. Claire left her laptop open one morning, a rare slip. She'd stepped out to take the kids to school, and I sat there, staring at the screen. An email was up, casual but intimate. Can't wait to see you again, D. No last name, no details, just that initial. I scrolled back, found more. They were careful, vague references to last time, mentions of meeting at the usual spot. My chest tightened as I read, each word a splinter under my skin. I didn't confront her. Couldn't. Not yet. I needed to know more, to see the shape of this thing that was unraveling my life. I started digging. The bar wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. I went back the next night, alone, parking across the street. The Rusty Anchor was a dive. Faded neon sign, chipped paint, a jukebox humming through the walls. I didn't go in. I just watched. Claire wasn't there, but I saw him, Daniel. He stepped out around midnight, lighting a cigarette, his face caught in the glow. Dark hair, sharp jaw, maybe late 30s. He looked like the kind of guy who knew he could take what he wanted. I memorized his license plate as he drove off in a black SUV. It was a small victory, but it felt like a weapon. Back home, I couldn't sleep. Claire lay beside me, her breathing soft and even, oblivious to the storm in my head. I kept seeing them together, her laugh, his arm, the way she'd lied to me without blinking. But it wasn't just the betrayal that gnawed at me. It was the why. What did he have that I didn't? I'm not a perfect man. Gruff, quiet, hands stained with grease. But I'd given her everything I had. The kids, the house, the years. Wasn't that enough? I started imagining their meetings, filling in the gaps with details I couldn't prove. It wasn't the usual affair, I could feel it. There was something strange about it, something I couldn't name. I hired a guy. Not a professional, just a buddy from the shop who'd done some shady stuff in his past. Tony didn't ask questions. He took my cash and the plate number and promised to find out who Daniel was. A week later, he handed me a folder. Daniel Reese, 38, married, no kids, worked as a freelance photographer, lived in a condo downtown. There were photos too, grainy shots of him outside the bar, one of him with Claire at a park, her hand on his chest. I stared at that picture until my eyes burned. Tony clapped my shoulder, said, "You sure you want to know more?" I nodded. I had to. Knowing his name made it real, but it didn't explain the twist that came next. Tony kept digging, tailing Daniel when I couldn't. He called me late one night, voice low, like he was afraid someone might hear. "Man, this ain't normal," he said. "You need to see this." We met at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and waitresses who don't look twice. He slid a stack of photos across to me. Most were what I expected: Daniel and Claire at the bar, a coffee shop, a motel I didn't recognize. But one stood out. It wasn't just them. There was a third person, a woman, blonde, petite, her arm looped through Daniel's. They were laughing, all three of them, like it was some kind of game. I didn't understand at first. "Who's she?" I asked. Tony shrugged. "His wife, Emily Reese. Been married 5 years." My brain stalled. His wife. Claire was meeting Daniel and his wife? I flipped through the photos again, looking for clues. They weren't sneaky about it, no dark corners, no quick glances over shoulders. They were out in the open, comfortable, like it was planned. My mind raced, trying to fit the pieces together. Was this some kind of arrangement? A shared secret I wasn't part of? I felt sick, but I couldn't stop staring. The next day, I followed Claire myself. She left the house in the afternoon, claiming a dentist appointment. I trailed her to a house in the suburbs. A nice place, 2 stories, manicured lawn. Daniel's SUV was in the driveway. I parked a block away, watched her knock, saw the blonde woman. "Emily, open the door." Claire smiled, stepped inside, and the door closed. I sat there for 3 hours, engine off, hands clenched. When she came out, her hair was mussed, her cheeks flushed. She drove home like nothing happened. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but I didn't. I went back to the garage and tore apart an old transmission instead. That night, I couldn't look at her. She cooked dinner, spaghetti, the kids' favorite, and chatted about their day. I nodded, grunted responses, my mind elsewhere. What were they doing in that house? Was it just Daniel, or was Emily part of it too? The thought made my skin crawl, not because of the act itself, but because of the deception. Claire had built a whole other life, one I wasn't invited to. I started planning. Not confrontation, not yet. Something bigger. Something that would hurt her the way she'd hurt me. The truth unraveled slowly, like a thread pulled from a sweater you don't want to ruin. I couldn't ask Claire outright. Pride, fear, or maybe just the hope I was wrong kept me quiet. Instead, I watched, waited, gathered scraps of their world. Tony came through again, this time with audio. He'd rigged a cheap recorder under Daniel's SUV, caught fragments of conversation. The tape was scratchy, but I heard enough. Claire's voice, soft and teasing. "She's better at this than you." Daniel laughing. "Give me time, I'll catch up." Then Emily, her tone sharp. "You two are hopeless without me." It wasn't just an affair. It was a trio, a twisted little club, and my wife was a willing member. I played that tape over and over, alone in the garage, the words carving into me. They weren't ashamed, they were proud, smug even. I pictured them in that house, tangled up in something I couldn't comprehend. It wasn't love, not with all 3 of them. It was something else, power, maybe, or thrill. Claire had always been restless, chasing little highs in her own quiet way. New hobbies, late-night drives, impulsive trips. I thought it was harmless. Now I saw it for what it was. A hunger I'd never satisfied. And they had. I started losing myself. Work suffered. Customers complained about missed deadlines. Oil-stained invoices piling up. The kids noticed too. "Dad, you okay?" My daughter asked one morning, her brow furrowed. I forced a smile, said I was just tired. Claire didn't notice. She was too busy spinning her web, her lies smoother now, her absences longer. I let her think I was clueless. It gave me time to build something of my own, a plan, a trap. Revenge wasn't enough. It had to be cruel, precise, a mirror to what she'd done. I tracked down Emily. Not to confront her, but to understand. She worked at a boutique downtown, selling overpriced scarves and candles. I went in one afternoon, pretending to browse. She was pretty, delicate, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I asked about a gift for my wife, kept it vague. She chatted easily, no hint of guilt. I wondered if she knew who I was, if Claire had ever mentioned me. Probably not. I was the shadow in her story, the fool left behind. I bought a scarf. Red, like the one Claire wore that first night I followed her, and left. It sat in my truck, a silent promise. The pieces were in place, but I still didn't know how deep it went. Were there others? Was this a one-off, or a pattern Claire had hidden for years? I needed proof, something undeniable. Tony got me into Daniel's email. Don't ask how, I didn't want to know. The messages were a goldmine. Claire wasn't the only one. There'd been a woman before her, someone named Rachel, who'd moved on after a few months. Emily wrote about it like it was a business deal. She wasn't the right fit. Claire's better. Daniel replied, she's got that edge we need. They talked about my wife like she was a toy they'd picked out together. It hit me then, this wasn't just betrayal. It was a game, a sick little dance they choreographed. Claire wasn't a victim, wasn't seduced. She'd chosen this, stepped into their world with eyes wide open. I found photos too, attached to one email. Not explicit, but close. Claire in a black dress, Emily's arm around her waist, Daniel smirking behind them. They were at a party, some loft with string lights and too many people. I didn't recognize the place, but I knew the look on her face. Happy. Freer than I'd seen her in years. That's what broke me. Not the act, but the joy she'd found without me. I stopped sleeping. Nights were for planning now. I'd lie next to her, listening to her breathe, imagining how I'd turn their game against them. It had to be public, humiliating, something that stripped away their smug little bubble. I started small. Anonymous tips to Daniel's clients, vague warnings about his personal life. A few canceled gigs, nothing major, just enough to rattle him. Emily's boutique got a fake review online. Something about unprofessional staff. Childish maybe, but it felt good. Claire didn't notice. She was too wrapped up in them. Then I found the key. A date in their emails, March 15th. A special night at the loft. 10 days away. I knew what I'd do. Not confrontation, not yet. Exposure. I'd let the world see what they were. Let their perfect little triangle collapse under its own weight. I started gathering what I'd need, cameras, contacts, a way in. The revenge was forming, sharp and cold, and I let it consume me. Claire had no idea what was coming. The days before March 15th stretched out like a taut wire, every hour humming with tension I couldn't shake. Claire floated through the house, oblivious, her lies polished to a shine. Book clubs hosting a guest speaker, she said that morning, brushing her hair in the mirror. I nodded, my face a mask, while my hands itched to smash something. She'd taken to wearing that red scarf I'd bought from Emily's boutique. Ironic, cruel, a taunt she didn't even know she was throwing. I let her go, watched her car disappear down the street, and then got to work. Tony was my lifeline now. He'd found the loft, some artist space downtown, rented out for private events. The kind of place where people with too much money and too few morals gathered to feel edgy. He'd scoped it out, gotten me blueprints from a guy who owed him a favor. There was a back entrance, a fire escape, windows that didn't lock right. I didn't tell him everything, just enough to keep him on board. You're playing with fire, he warned, handing me a bag of gear. A small camera, a microphone, zip ties I didn't explain. I didn't care. Fire was what I wanted. I spent hours planning. The loft party wasn't just a night out. It was their celebration, their little ritual. Emails hinted at it. Can't wait to show her off, Daniel wrote. She's ready, Emily replied. Claire was the star, the prize they'd groomed. I wondered what ready meant, what they'd pulled her into. My mind spun dark scenarios, each worse than the last, but I didn't stop to dwell. Emotion was a luxury I couldn't afford. I tested the camera in the garage, its tiny lens glinting like an eye. It would see everything they didn't want seen. The kids were my anchor, the only thing keeping me from tipping over. That night, I helped my son with a science project, volcanoes of all things. We mixed vinegar and baking soda, watched it bubble over, and I thought about Claire. She'd erupt too soon enough, but not in a way she'd expect. My daughter asked why I was quiet. Just thinking, I said, ruffling her hair. She didn't push, but her eyes lingered. Kids see more than you think. I tucked them in, locked the house, and sat in the dark, the camera in my lap. Tomorrow it would begin. March 15th dawned gray and cold, a fitting shroud. Claire left early, claiming a brunch with friends. She wore that black dress from the photo, the one that clung to her like a second skin. "Don't wait up," she said, kissing my cheek. Her lips felt like a stranger's. I smiled, said, "Have fun," and watched her go. The kids were at a sleepover, the house empty. Perfect. I loaded the truck, camera, mic, a laptop, a burner phone I'd bought with cash. My hands were steady, but my pulse thrummed like an engine pushed too hard. The loft was in an old warehouse district, all brick and rusted iron. I parked 2 blocks away, pulled a hoodie over my head, and walked the rest. The fire escape was where Tony said it'd be, tucked behind a dumpster. I climbed, the metal creaking under my weight, and slipped through a window into a storage room. Voices hummed below. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. I set up the camera on a shelf, angled through a crack in the door. The mic went under a table, taped tight. Then I waited, crouched in the shadows, my breath shallow. They arrived an hour later. I saw Claire first, her hair swept up, her laugh cutting through the noise. Daniel followed, his hand on her back, and Emily beside him, blonde hair glowing under the lights. The room was full. Maybe 30 people, all dressed like they belonged in a magazine. I didn't recognize anyone, but they knew Claire. Heads turned, smiles flashed. She moved like a queen, confident, radiant. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just a fling. It was a stage, and she was performing. The night unfolded in fragments. I watched through the camera feed on my laptop, parked back in the truck. They danced, all 3 of them, hands brushing, bodies close. Not blatant, but deliberate enough to hint, to tease. People whispered, grinned, like it was a show they'd paid to see. Claire leaned into Emily once, whispered something that made her laugh. Daniel watched, proud, possessive. I clenched the steering wheel until my knuckles ached. This was their world, their rules. But I'd rewrite the ending. The footage was gold, hours of it, raw and unfiltered. I stayed up all night, splicing it together in the garage. Claire's voice, Daniel's smirk, Emily's sly glances. I cut it tight, no fluff, just the moments that mattered. The dance, the whispers, the way they moved as a unit. I added captions, names, dates, the truth in stark white text. Claire Bennett, loving wife. Daniel Reese, devoted husband. Emily Reese, perfect partner. Irony dripped from every frame. By dawn, I had a 10-minute reel, a bomb waiting to detonate. I didn't stop there. Revenge isn't just exposure, it's precision. I dug into their lives, found cracks to widen. Daniel's photography clients, artsy types with big egos, got anonymous emails with stills from the video, vague threats about reputation. Emily's boutique saw a flood of fake orders, canceled at the last second, clogging her system. Small cuts, but they'd bleed. Claire was trickier. Her friends, her book club, her coworkers, they'd see it all soon enough. I wanted her to feel the walls closing in the way I had. The next day, she came home late, humming, her eyes bright. "Good night," I asked, casual, stirring coffee. She nodded, oblivious. "Great night. You should have come." The lie was effortless, and I almost laughed. "Maybe next time," I said. She didn't notice the edge in my voice, didn't see the laptop glowing in the garage. I let her sleep, let her dream in her perfect little bubble. It wouldn't last. I uploaded the video to a private server, sent links to burner accounts I'd set up, dozens of them ready to spread. I tested the waters. Sent the reel to one of Daniel's clients, a gallery owner with a temper. By noon, Tony called. Guy's pissed. Canceled a shoot, said Daniel's unprofessional. I smiled for the first time in weeks. It was working. The gallery owner wouldn't keep quiet. Word would spread, whispers turning to shouts. Emily's phone buzzed nonstop that afternoon. I saw it on a live feed Tony hacked from her shop's security cam. She looked rattled, snapping at a clerk. Claire didn't know yet. She'd find out soon. The unraveling was slow, deliciously so. Daniel's career took the first hit. 2 more clients dropped him by Wednesday, citing personal conflicts. I watched his SUV idle outside the loft. His silhouette slumped, phone pressed to his ear. Emily's boutique got a health inspection, anonymous tip, of course, tying her up in paperwork. Claire started to fray too. She came home Thursday, distracted, checking her phone more than usual. Something wrong? I asked, peeling potatoes. She shrugged. Just work stuff. Lies piled on lies, but her mask was slipping. Friday, I upped the ante. I printed stills from the video, Claire mid-laugh, Emily's arm around her, Daniel's smug grin, and mailed them to her book club. No note, just the images, postmarked from a town she'd never suspect. Saturday, she got a call. I heard her in the kitchen, voice tight. What do you mean, photos? Who sent them? She hung up, pale, and avoided my eyes all day. I kept busy in the garage, tweaking the truck, letting her stew. The kids were at soccer, the house quiet. Perfect timing. That night, I dropped the big one. The video went live, not everywhere, not yet, just a targeted blast. Daniel's remaining clients, Emily's suppliers, Claire's co-workers, each got a link from a different burner account. No explanation, just the footage. I watched the hits climb on my laptop, a silent ticker of chaos. By midnight, Claire's phone was a symphony of pings. She silenced it, but her hands shook. You okay? I asked, leaning in the doorway. She jumped, nodded too fast. Fine. Just tired. I let it go, but I knew she wasn't sleeping. Sunday, the cracks showed. She left early, didn't say where, came back with red-rimmed eyes. Daniel's SUV was spotted at a bar, Tony's update, arguing with Emily in the lot. I didn't need to see it to know the pressure was building. Their little triangle was buckling, and I hadn't even played my final card. I sat in the dark, the scarf in my hands, twisting it tight. Soon they'd all feel the full weight. Monday was the breaking point. Claire didn't go to work, called in sick, stayed in bed, blinds drawn. I brought her tea, played the concerned husband. Rough weekend? I asked. She mumbled something about a headache, wouldn't meet my eyes. Her phone stayed off, but I knew why. Tony had eyes on Daniel and Emily. They'd fought again, louder this time in public. A supplier dropped Emily's boutique, citing unreliable management. Daniel lost his last big contract, a wedding shoot worth thousands. The video was spreading, whispers turning to a roar. I kept the pressure on. Flyers went up around their neighborhoods. Stills from the loft, no names, just faces. Know them? The text read. Vague enough to dodge trouble, sharp enough to cut. Claire's co-workers got a second wave, emails with audio clips, her voice clear as day. She's better at this than you. Laughter. By noon, she got a text. I saw it flash on her screen before she snatched it away. We need to talk, it said. No name, but I knew. She left an hour later, scarf around her neck, hands trembling. I followed her to the loft. She met Daniel and Emily there, the 3 of them huddled in the empty space. I didn't go in, just watched from the truck, the camera rolling. They argued, voices rising, gestures wild. Emily stormed out first, Daniel after her, Claire last. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, head in her hands. I drove home, left her to drown in it. That night, she came back silent, hollow. Bad day? I asked, flipping through a magazine. She nodded, disappeared upstairs. The revenge was close now, so close I could taste it. I had one move left, the cruelest, the one that'd shatter them all. I spent the night finalizing it, the garage my war room. The kids slept, the house still. Claire didn't suspect a thing. Tomorrow I'd pull the trigger and their world would burn. I smiled, cold and quiet, ready for the end. Tuesday morning broke heavy, the sky bruised with clouds. Claire barely spoke, picked at her toast, eyes sunken, a ghost of the woman I'd married. I kept up the act, humming as I packed the kids' lunches, asking if she needed anything. She shook her head, voice flat. "I'll be fine." She wouldn't be. Not after today. The final piece was ready, a guillotine I'd sharpened in the dark. I kissed her forehead, cold, perfunctory, and left for the garage, my sanctuary, my command center. The plan was simple but brutal. I'd gathered everything: video, audio, photos, emails, and woven it into a single, unescapable net. Not just for Claire, Daniel, and Emily, but for everyone they knew. I'd hacked their contacts weeks ago, thanks to Tony's less-than-legal skills, and built a list: family, friends, colleagues, neighbors. Hundreds of names, each a thread in their unraveling. The burner accounts were primed, the files uploaded to a dozen anonymous sites. One click, and it'd all go live, public, permanent, a spotlight they couldn't dim. I waited until noon. Claire was out. Another errand. Her excuses thinner every day. The kids were at school, the house mine. I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, and sent the first wave. Emails blasted out, each with a link. See what they've been hiding. The video played automatically. Claire's laugh, Daniel's smirk, Emily's sly touch, all captioned with their names, their lies. I followed it with photos, stills from the loft, the park, the motel, posted to X from fake profiles, tagged with their real ones. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Hashtag Claire Bennett, hashtag Daniel Reese, hashtag Emily Reese. By 1 p.m., the views were climbing. Tony called, voice tight. "It's hitting, man." Daniel's at the bar, yelling at his phone. Emily's shop's a mess. Customers walking out. I didn't answer, just watched the numbers tick up. Claire's coworkers retweeted. Her book club posted shocked emojis. Her sister texted me, "What's going on? Is this real?" I played dumb, no idea, checking now, and let it spread. The beauty was the chaos. No one knew who'd started it, but everyone saw it. Their perfect little trio was a circus now, and I held the ringmaster's whip. By evening, the fallout was a storm. Claire came home late, her face a mask of panic. "We need to talk," she said, voice trembling. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, calm as ice. "About what?" She hesitated, then thrust her phone at me. Screenshots, messages, the video looping on X. This? Someone spreading lies, ruining everything. Her eyes begged me to believe her, to fix it. I took the phone, scrolled slow, let the silence stretch. "Looks real to me," I said finally, handing it back. She froze, mouth open, no words coming. She tried to explain, stammered about friends, misunderstandings, how it wasn't what it seemed. I listened, nodding, letting her dig deeper. "Daniel's just a photographer. Emily's his wife, we were collaborating." I cut her off. "Collaborating on what? That dance? Those late nights?" Her face crumpled, and for a second, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "How long?" I asked, voice low. She didn't answer, just sank into a chair, hands covering her face. I left her there, walked to the garage, locked the door. The second wave hit while she cried. I'd saved the audio for last. Claire's voice, clear and damning. "She's better at this than you." I sent it to her parents, her boss, the kids' school principal. Petty, maybe, but it cut deeper than the video. Her mother called her. I heard the muffled shouting through the wall. Her boss emailed, a cold request for a meeting. The school's PTA chat lit up, gossip racing. I watched it all on my laptop, the screen a window into her collapse. She'd built this life with them. Now it'd bury her. Daniel and Emily weren't faring better. X was a battlefield. Clients bailing, friends unfollowing, their condo's address leaked by some troll. Tony texted, "They're packing, fighting, looks like a split. Good. Let them turn on each other." I leaned back, the scarf in my hands. It's red, a dull stain now. The revenge wasn't done, but it was close. One last twist and they'd never recover. Wednesday, Claire broke. She didn't leave the house. Curled on the couch, phone dead, staring at nothing. The kids asked why Mom was sad. I said she wasn't feeling well, sent them to their rooms. Her world was ash now. Friends ghosted her. Her job hung by a thread. Her family raged. I'd gotten a call from her brother. Furious. "What did she do to you?" I played the wounded husband. Found out she was living a double life. And he hung up swearing. She had no allies left. I went bigger. Flyers hit their streets. Hundreds, scattered like confetti, each with a QR code to the video. Neighbors gawked, whispered. Daniel's landlord evicted them, citing disruptive behavior. Emily's boutique shut down. Too many refunds, too much scandal. I mailed the scarf back to her. A note tucked inside. "You forgot this." No signature, but she'd know. Claire found out from a coworker's text. Screamed at me. "Why's this happening?" I shrugged. "Karma, maybe." She didn't suspect me, not yet. Her guilt blinded her. The kids were the hardest part. They'd see it eventually, school whispers, friends' parents talking. I pulled them aside that night, sat them down. "Mom made some mistakes," I said, keeping it vague. "We're figuring it out." My daughter cried. My son nodded, jaw tight. I hated that part, but Claire had forced it. She'd chosen this over them, over us. I tucked them in, promised we'd be okay. We would be without her. That night, I finalized the endgame. A live stream, scheduled for Friday, announced on X from a fake account. The truth about Claire, Daniel, and Emily, unmasked. I'd hacked their loft security cam. Tony's last favor. Caught them arguing days ago, raw and ugly. It'd play for anyone who clicked. A final nail in their coffin. I slept sounder than I had in months, the weight lifting. They'd feel it all soon. Thursday was chaos unleashed. The live stream teaser spread. Thousands of views. Comments piling up. "Who are these people? Disgusting." Claire's boss fired her. Email, no meeting effective immediately. Her parents showed up, demanded answers. She sobbed, begged them to believe her. But they left, shaking their heads. I stayed quiet, cooked dinner, let her flail. The kids hid upstairs, confused, scared. I hated that, but it was her mess, not mine. Daniel and Emily imploded. Tony sent photos. They'd moved to a motel, bags strewn, faces drawn. Ex-posts claimed they'd split. Emily blaming Claire, Daniel blaming them both. Their friends turned, airing dirty laundry online. Always knew they were weird. She dragged him into it. I fueled it, fake accounts stirring the pot, leaking old emails. Their triangle shattered, each corner blaming the others. Perfect. I wanted them isolated, broken, before the final blow. Claire tried me again that night. "I'm sorry," she whispered, eyes swollen. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." I stared at her, cold. What was it supposed to be? She had no answer, just tears. I didn't comfort her. Let her sit in it, let it burn. The live stream was set, the cam footage queued. One more day and they'd be rubble. I locked the garage, checked the links, slept with the laptop humming beside me. The end was here. Friday morning, she left a note. "I can't do this." She was gone when I woke. Car, clothes, scarf. I didn't chase her. The kids asked. I said she needed time. At noon, the stream went live. 3 hours of their fight looped, no escape. Views soared, tens of thousands, then more. X exploded, their names trending. I watched, alone, as the world tore them apart. Revenge complete. The aftermath was quiet, a hollow kind of victory. Claire didn't come back. Texts from her sister said she'd crashed there. A wreck, barely speaking. Daniel and Emily vanished. Motel cleared out, no trace. X buzzed for days, then faded, their scandal replaced by the next big thing. I deleted the accounts, wiped the drives, burned the scarf in the backyard. The kids adjusted, slowly, with questions I answered as best I could. "Mom's figuring things out," I said. They nodded, trusted me. We'd heal. The house felt bigger without her, but cleaner too. I sold her stuff, dresses, books, that damn black dress, donated the cash to the kids' school. Her parents called once, apologized, offered help. I declined. This was mine now, me, the kids, a life she'd thrown away. Work picked up. Customers sensed the change, tipped extra. Tony clapped my shoulder. "You're a ghost now, man. Untouchable." I smiled, faint but real. I don't know where they went. Claire, Daniel, Emily. Don't care. Rumors said she'd left the state. They'd split for good. Their worlds collapsed, mine stood firm. The revenge was cruel, yes, public, relentless, a mirror to their betrayal. It wasn't just pain. It was erasure. They'd never rebuild, not like they were. I'd made sure of that. Nights, I sit in the garage, tools in hand, the hum of engines my peace. The storm's over. We're free.